Welcome to Baseball and Coffee, episode 35, Monday morning, just after the Futures game and first round of the MLB draft. What's up, Aaron?
Not too much.
Right on. So today we're going to cover some of our thoughts with the Futures game and players that we liked, maybe some players that didn't impress us as much. And we'll talk a bit about the first round of the MLB draft, how that might impact us fantasy-wise, some of the picks we liked, and then open forum. And we're going to open some new cards today, which should be a blast. So, Aaron, it's been, I don't know, a couple of weeks now. Any coffee stories to share with the listeners?
Nothing too groundbreaking in terms of coffee. I've been having a lot of Guatemala lately. I've been enjoying that. It's been a while since I've had that on a consistent basis. I guess, we both have worked in coffee. I currently still work in coffee. I recently applied for a roaster position at a small roaster.
Awesome.
I just I'm at a place where I miss being more interactive with actual coffee.
Mm-hmm.
I've been in the job that I have for almost a year now. I just miss being around coffee, and I don't think anything's going to happen there, but I'm at a place where, I think we all have those bins in the road, and it's like, I'd like to stay with Starbucks, but if there's another opportunity that gets me a different opportunity, this particular position, you got to do some green loading, some blending, some supporting of roasting on off shifts, and it just sounded really interesting. And I just love working with coffee. And yeah, I think, as I've talked about on the pod a few times, just wanting to continue to cup and keep that skill up.
Mm-hmm.
It's navigating jobs and your interests, and especially working in coffee, like the opportunities are just kind of varied. Not really wanting to go back to retail necessarily,
Right.
wanting to stay more on the production side. But
Cool. I agree. There's a really visceral feeling, for me at least, when I was able to, put my hands into 5 pounds of coffee, right? Like, you get these 5-pound bullet bags as a coffee shop owner, and that smell and that feel, and it's just it's something I miss. When you say, kind of getting back to that, I completely 100% understand that particular feeling. For me, because I am so far removed from it at this point in time, the only real opportunity I have is opening a bag of freshly roasted coffee, right? There's that smell that brings me back to a lot of those work memories. But yeah, it's a really special thing, and it's something that I think you can only get from coffee itself. So I feel it. I don't have much to share. I've been still working through some of the Guatemala that I had. Sounds like Guatemala hit the market pretty hard if we're both consuming a lot of Guatemala right now. But it continues to impress. Like I've shared before, there's something really comforting for me about a really beautiful, kind of straightforward Central American coffee in the morning. The only other caffeine thing I'll share is it's freaking hot right now in Walla Walla. It's been in the mid to high 90s most of the last couple of weeks. And there's not a whole lot of shade here. So I actually have consciously cut down on caffeine consumption in order to kind of survive the heat. And it's going to continue to escalate here over the next month or so. So I have to drink my coffee in fits and starts or spurts at the very beginning of the day when it's cool, and be sure to hydrate so that you don't get dehydrated. I miss the winter months of being able to drink as much coffee as you want.
Let's have like an iced coffee root beer float or something like that.
Exactly. All right, man. Futures game was fun. Do you have any initial impressions of the Futures game this year?
I enjoyed the presentation overall on Peacock. I think, as I said to you guys over our thread and our group with our league, I hadn't had a chance to really see it in the past based on where it was broadcast.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoyed the scout. I'm going to use that term loosely. I think he works for MLB Pipeline, but I'm not sure.
Jim
But like some of the like the way that they would comp everyone. I think comps are just really risky. But I also think as well, like you have these players that people have never seen before, and you're trying to put their skills in context, and making a comp is sometimes the easiest way to do that. But being a little closer to it, I didn't always appreciate that. But I thought Peacock did a nice job, and I liked that while you couldn't follow along with StatCast on Savant, they were giving you exo velocities and you know, pitch movements and things like that are just appreciated, because that's something with these guys we don't always, depending on where they play, we have mixed access to those kinds of numbers. So I appreciated that as well.
Right. Yeah, the comp thing, it's a really good point that you bring up, because for me, on the one hand, like Yonder Alonso's comps were horrible. I appreciate his enthusiasm, and I love that there's a Cuban American as a part of the broadcast team, and he's become such an important part of that Peacock presentation and the YouTube presentation. But man, some of the things he says, some of the comps he has are just make me crazy. But I think to your point, so I walked away thinking, come on, Yonder, like stop. But your point is well taken in that in order to draw your kind of normal fan into something like the futures game, you have to give them something that they know or something that they recognize. And comps are the way to do that. Whether we enjoy comps as analysts or someone who digs a little bit deeper, you know, it's to be debated. But no, there is value in it. I appreciate that comment from you, because I did not see that value while I was watching myself. And even Jim Callis, you know, who obviously gets paid to do prospect stuff full time with Pipeline, he's not my favorite prospect analyst. And so that I just saw that presentation as an attempt to bring people in. And there was a point in time where I actually turned the sound off when I was watching, because I didn't enjoy it, but it is what it is.
I always appreciate your recall that Jim Callis is the one I was referencing, that I knew that they had someone on there from Pipeline. I couldn't remember his name. My favorite moment with him was how excited he got when De La Cruz came up to bat. He was like, he couldn't wait to see him. You hear it in his voice. And also when Jackson Trio ground out on his first pitch, he was like, oh, I wanted to see him. I wanted to see more. I wanted to see more of him.
Right.
So I like that like fan aspect of that. I mean, he's there because he's, like you said, he's a professional. He writes for MLB Pipeline, but
I do wish that they went 9 innings. I think that anyone who sticks around until the 7th inning is obviously into prospects and is there for the long haul. There's no reason why they can't go 9 innings and get everybody at least one at bat and pitchers an inning. And I do think that there's some tweaking that they can do. I also enjoyed the mic'd up players. It just gave a little bit more personal context to the game, and I enjoyed that part quite a bit. Is there a player that stood out to you, or a couple of players that stood out to you immediately that you learned something from in this game?
Yeah, the two that are 3 players that stuck out to me. I wrote down some things were particular skills and things of particular players, but sure. Some of the positives for me was seeing Zach Bean, his bat control. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it was because his bat was blue, or it seemed like he was up there waving a tree stump. Yep. But he just seemed to be able to get to everything. Mm-hmm. And that was just impressive play coverage, and just, I don't know, our league mate compared him to Larry Bird. And I totally see that after seeing him. From
an appearance standpoint, correct?
Absolutely, yeah. Just someone who looks like a gym rat and doesn't look like an athlete. It's just interesting.
Right. So can I comment on Dean real quick?
Yeah.
Go back and forth with players. Yeah. It's interesting because he was one of the players that really stood out to me too. He was drafted as a power hitter, right? 6'4", left-handed, was going to hit bombs in Colorado. That's kind of how he was sold when he was drafted. And what I really loved, what I saw from him was he just looked more of like a baseball player than he did a power hitter. There were elements of his game that were hark back to a different era of baseball, and an era that I think you and I both miss, of, you know, just kind of dumping the ball into left field as a left-handed hitter and playing with speed. He's not the fastest guy, but he steals bags. And so my impression of him was, okay, like, this isn't a three true outcome player that he was kind of sold as in the draft. This is an actual baseball player that I'm going to enjoy watching. So that was really, really cool. I enjoyed that quite a bit from him.
I think your comment about his speed is interesting, because I had heard scouts specifically say don't pay attention to his speed numbers, and the minors, that they won't translate. Well, when he got on base the second time, he immediately stole second and third, and it wasn't even close.
Right.
And so, and I can't remember if Langoliers was still in the game at that point. But like, he was touted for his pop time, and like that's something that they mentioned several times with him. And he's like really impressive behind the plate. And he took 2 bags on him like pretty easily.
Right.
They just his aggressiveness on the base pass. So yeah, you see that approach and you see that back control, and you think about his home park in Colorado, and you're like, man, this, and you add the speed element. I mean, could he hit like 330, 340 in his peak season? I mean, it doesn't seem unrealistic with that home park. If he's going to be spraying the ball like that with
Right.
that spacious outfield, it's and that speed early in his career, it's crazy. And we don't play in a batting average league in our primary home league, but nonetheless, yeah, it was just interesting. Someone I kind of dismissed as a Rocky, who I'm not dismissing anymore.
Right. Well, I also, so to speak on the speed part, I have, being rostering Ronald Acuna, I was thinking as I was watching Veen that Acuna isn't really that fast, but he's an incredibly skilled base stealer, right? His instincts are off the charts. And so this year he has 20 steals in 270 plate appearances, but his sprint speed on Savant is only 74, right? Whereas someone like Andres Jimenez, its sprint speed is 94, but I think he has 5 steals this year. And so I think at times, because we have so many metrics at our disposal, we end up, or I end up looking at the actual sprint speed and taking it into account too much as far as whether they have the ability to steal bases or not, because it's about the jump, right? It's about the reaction. It's about, how you slide. It's about how you read the pitcher. There's all sorts of different things that go into stealing bases. So someone like Veen, I've heard the same thing, which is he's not going to steal more than 10 bases a year in Major League Baseball. Don't pay attention to the fact that he has 35 already this year.
Right.
But I wonder if that's because we're stereotyping a 6'4" right fielder, or if someone is actually seen. Well, I do know too that in A-ball there are different rules as far as being able to pick players off and jumps and things like that. But what I saw in this game was a player that might get you 20 steals, right? I what was watching him was I thought a lot about Kyle Tucker. Maybe it's just because it's the length and the left-handed bat and being in right field and being a 2020 type of guy potentially, but Veen looked great. I don't know that I have the guts to pursue a Colorado prospect given the track record, but yeah, I enjoyed watching him quite a bit. Who's the next guy on your list there?
The next thing that popped I wrote down was I'll switch to pitcher. Emerson Hancock really impressed me. He pitched later in the game, but of the right-handed power arms that I saw, I thought he had the best command, and the horizontal movement that he was getting on his two seam into right-handers, they just couldn't handle it. And so I just think someone like that who's a power arm who can dominate right-handers. I didn't get a chance to see him if he threw a changeup or not, but his assertiveness and confidence and command on the mound kind of stuck out to me and made me pause as to why is this guy not on my roster.
He did throw a changeup. I think it was 86 is what I have here in my notes. But yeah, there was no way. Right-handers were just getting, the pitch looked like it was down, the two-seamer looked like it was down the middle, and all of a sudden he was hitting the handle of the bat and they were fouling it off. What's interesting about Hancock is, he was essentially shut down last year because they were worried about his arm. he didn't have the same stuff. He wasn't throwing mid 90s last year either. So his prospect status had really decreased in many people's eyes, and he got passed by Kirby and obviously Gilbert and even Brash. What's interesting to me about, well, in pitching, we know goes up and down, right? And so if you believed in his talent enough to pick him number 6 in the draft, you have to understand he's going to move slowly. The other part is Seattle, the Mariners, in developing pitching, they don't push their pitchers very hard in the minors at all. They're really protective of the arms. And so Hancock was shut down, I think, as a precaution and not because of an actual injury. In watching him, what I loved is, again, harking back to a different time, he's a 2-seam slider changeup guy, right? So everything is low. He did elevate a bit with a 4-seam, but he looked like pitchers from a different era. He looked like the prototype of the Pittsburgh Pirates when they wanted everybody to throw the 2-seam fastball. And watching him, even though it was one inning, I have been watching a little bit of his minor league starts. It wouldn't surprise me if Hancock was as good as either of the other 2 starters that I mentioned, Gilbert or Kirby. I think that profile will play in T-Mobile. And as long as there's a good infield defense behind him, I think Hancock has a real shot at being a number 2 starter in Major League Baseball. The one thing about him is I don't know if he'll get the same strikeouts as Kirby, and if he doesn't, from a fantasy perspective, he may not be worth quite as much. But yeah, Hancock looks great.
Yeah, he really impressed me.
He was.
Do you want me to keep throwing players, or do you want to throw one?
No, go ahead.
Okay. I'll go with one that I wasn't impressed with, a hitter on the hitter side. I thought Alvarez, to me, looked like really stiff at the plate.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to overreact with just what I saw. I know that they made a point that he has a really short, compact swing. But yeah, I just watching him at the plate, it just didn't seem super athletic. It didn't seem to have great coverage.
Mm-hmm.
And just seemed stiff at the plate. And so I haven't seen him enough to know that if that was just an off day or if he was nervous, but he didn't impress me up there.
He's very, he's got a lot of all or nothing to his game. And that's the part that makes me nervous is, he's up there taking big hacks. And I know he has very good bat to ball skill, but we've seen a lot of players like that, right? Who are strong, who, swing as hard as they possibly can. And the ones that survive are the ones that have that really great hand-eye coordination and bat to ball skill. I would not be surprised to see him be like a 240, 20 home run, 25 home run sort of guy. He's certainly didn't look to me like a number 1 overall prospect. I also worry about the body being as thick as he is already, and he's 20, right? What does that look like at 25? And is he at some point in time going to become, at minimum, too big to ever leg out any sort of hits? So that can also impact his average from a fantasy perspective. He's under the list of players that I had some questions about as well. So the player that was probably most impressive to me in this game was Robert Hassel.
Okay.
I think both he and Pete Crow Armstrong look like 2020 type outfielders to me, which is in most leagues is an outfield 2, I think. But Hassel looks to me to be an even better hitter. And he was one player as I watched that I was a little bit sad that I didn't roster him. I was really impressed with him just as an overall player. I guess that's the theme of this pod is the players who are able to do multiple things were really fun. And I can see really thriving as baseball starts to change, right? As we have, as the shift goes away and as we're looking at less 3 true outcome types of plays, in part because of the way MLB is going to legislate the game. I think a player like Hassel or like, the bat to ball that we saw from Veen or like Crow Armstrong, they're going to become more and more valuable. So Hassel was one that I really enjoyed quite a bit. So I've got to bring up three pitchers. I know you're probably hesitant to bring up your own dudes, but your impressions on Yuri Perez, Jack Leiter, and Ricky Tiedemann. What did you see?
Well, taking them in reverse order, I Tiedemann, I was excited to see him because thanks to your breakdown, I had some familiarity with him.
Mhm.
And so just getting a chance to see him from the left side and what he did, I didn't have any takeaways, particularly in his arsenal. I just enjoyed seeing him pitch for the first time and see like how I remember you talked about how big he was, and he certainly carried over for sure. Jack Leiter, I wasn't able to take too much away from because all I did was talk about his dad the whole time. And then, I loved what I saw from Yuri. I mean, he had a clean inning with the strikeout and looked in command out there. So, yeah, it was just good to see him. Good to see him out there.
I loved, so Yuri looks, obviously he's he's listed at 6'8". They said he's closer to 6'9" or 6'10". It's very strange to see him, a pitcher that tall and skinny on the mound. The only thing that I think, not that I don't like, I wish that he threw a little bit more over the top because he loses a little bit of the advantage in being so tall. But his changeup was, I forgot who he threw it to. I have it listed here somewhere. He made somebody look absolutely silly with I think it's an 89-mile-an-hour changeup. But in his changeup, I think got up to 92, which is just, I guess Miami must teach that power change, the same one that Edward Cabrera throws. Yuri looked great. Yuri looked every bit the number one pitching prospect in baseball. And at this point, there's no way I'm ranking Grayson Rodriguez over him. I haven't seen enough of Espino, and I know I love Espino, obviously, but yeah, Yuri looked great. Leiter,
It was Valera, by the way. I have my
Valera
scorecard. It was
on the
Valera that
change.
you struck out on the change. Yep.
Mhm. Yeah, I have struck out on an 89-mile-an-hour change. Nasty. That was my notes. Leiter looked great. Leiter didn't look like an ace to me, but he looked like the comp that they put out, which I actually kind of enjoyed, was Mike Mussina, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I didn't see
I did hear
Leiter
that.
as a dominant pitcher, but he had a really, really nice rise on his fastball. His slider looked pretty dominant. He obviously, bloodlines are great. Bloodlines, Vanderbilt, he's got a lot of things going for him. I think he got up to 98. Let me check the notes here. I know he's had a tremendous control problems and command problems in Double A thus far this year, but watching him pitch, his compact delivery, to me, that's all there. I think he's gonna end up being at minimum a middle of the rotation starter and probably a number two. And Tiedemann is a pitcher I roster. I love him. I just think he had more swag than any pitcher out there in the game. He's built like a tight end almost. Right, he's 6'4", 220, but he looks like he could be 230 or 240. And the fastball is just, he's sitting 95, can play with it a little bit. He put rise on it, he just run. The slider is a little bit horizontal right now, and then the only other worry for me is pitching in Toronto, but Tiedemann looks like the real deal. The only players I have left on the ones that I wanted to discuss that I liked, Cartaya hit a bomb to center field that was caught, but definitely showed why he has the power that he does. Who's it off of? It was not. I have that it was 98 miles an hour, and that it was middle. I like his stance. He looks like a power hitting catcher. As long as he can stay healthy, I think it'll be interesting to see what he does with Will Smith. We had that conversation before in terms of who they play.
It was Hunter Brown, by the way.
So it's 98 off of Hunter Brown.
Yeah, and that was the fly ball that Dominguez dropped.
Right. Langoliers I really liked a lot, more as a throwback real life catcher, maybe not as a fantasy catcher. I think he's probably low end top 10 fantasy catcher at his peak, like the 250 20 home run type. But I really enjoyed him as a player. I think the A's got a really nice catcher. I mentioned Picro Armstrong before, just looks like a hitter. I don't know if he'll get to any sort of power, and I don't know if he's a 300 hitter necessarily, but I think a huge pickup for the Cubs in that trade with the Mets. We have to mention Ellie De La Cruz, another player you roster. He was the one guy that really oozed star power to me. of all the hitters. He's just electric athlete. You mentioned Jim Callis's reaction to Ellie De La Cruz, but he was really, really fun. What did you think watching De La
I was
Cruz?
I was glad that he didn't swing at the first pitch. You know, Ellie is his brand is to be super aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
And so just to see him come up in his first bat in this game, and he took some pitches and he didn't seem overly aggressive. I think that's just an important skill set for him to continue to hone. And, you know, there was a story of him getting benched at one point early on in his first year in pro ball because the coaches told him specifically, and he like swung at the first two pitches, both at bats, and they benched him. But anyway, I loved seeing him take a good at bat there, and then he ended up handing a fly out that was 107 miles an hour off the bat, but he launched at 44 degrees, which is the only reason it didn't go out. He got underneath of it. Yeah, I wish I had gotten to see another at bat from him. They were mentioning that he had 2 games this week before the Futures game where he hit home runs from both sides of the plate.
Mm-hmm.
That was another reason I wish I would have gotten to see his left-handed swing as well. But he looked great.
So the only other player I have under kind of players, things that I liked from the game, Antoine Kelly's slider. Did you see that?
Antoine Kelly, I did not.
So left-handed, probably reliever for the Brewers or in the Brewers organization. I saw the slider and I thought to myself, man, they need to trade Josh Hader now, right? Trade Hader and put Kelly in some, move Williams into the 9th, put Kelly in the 8th. Like, he looked at that kind of slider is like, that kind of stuff is reminiscent to me of someone like Hader. And if you have 2 versions of it, man, just go get what you can for him. Although they're in contention, which is why they're not actually trading him. I get it, but yeah, that's what it made me think of. Some of the stuff that I wanted to discuss with you that I wasn't overly impressed with is Bobby Miller a starter or reliever?
He looked like a reliever to me, but I will say, like, his changeup. You mentioned Yuri's changeup, Bobby Miller's changeup, man. It looked like
Filthy.
Luis Castillo. I just absolutely sick pitch. But yeah, he was all over the place.
His change to strike out Jason Dominguez, it was 83, but it looked like, what I have here is that his stuff looks like a cartoon, right?
Mm-hmm.
It looks like Bugs Bunny. He's throwing 101 and then he's got this 83 mile an hour change coming out of the same place. If he can command his pitches, obviously he's an ace, but he was a little bit more inconsistent than I would have liked. I think fantasy wise, rostering him as a gamble, if you have the space for an end of the season run, could pay huge dividends. I think they could put him in a leverage role pretty quickly if they needed to, and that he would perform really well. Future, dynasty leagues as a starter, I'm not quite sure whether I buy into Bobby Miller yet. I have no idea what to make of Jason Dominguez. We talked about this yesterday. Drops a fly ball in center field, looks silly on Bobby Miller's changeup, and then he hits a home run. What you said, it was 107.5 was the exit velocity on the home run.
Yeah.
Hits a home run off of Kyle Harrison. That was just an absolute shot, right? So the athleticism is there. You forget that he's only 19 years old, 19 or 20. I think he's 19.
Yeah.
So I don't know what to make of his volatility. He's not a prospect that I would be investing in yet, but I think by the time we actually know if he's good or not, if he actually is good, it'll be too late for me. Do you have any thoughts on Jason Dominguez? No?
Yeah, I mean, I was pretty neutral on him. Like you said, it was kind of a mixed bag. We certainly know he has the power and he showed that, but
right.
Yeah, he wasn't super impressive to me.
So this isn't a hot take, but I wasn't impressed with Corbin Carroll. I think he's a good player. But I was watching him swing through 97. That was middle. I expect the number 1 player, who some people think is the number 1 prospect in baseball, to hit a middle fastball, right? And I know that's 1 pitch, right? Smallest sample size you can possibly have. And I saw the electrifying speed, and I understand that he has power, but given the Diamondbacks organization, and the fact that he has a lot of swing and miss and stuff in the zone, he's not a player that if I rostered him currently, I would probably be looking to sell high. I think his upside is probably 15 to 20 with maybe 30 steals, which obviously is a pretty darn good player. But I'm not in on him in the same way that some others are. What were your takeaways, Corbin Carroll?
He looked smaller than I thought. I knew he wasn't a large player, but and just physically in stature, but and he looked really small. And he looked like an Adam Eaton size.
Yep.
I didn't expect that.
I think he's 5'9". Am I wrong? Something like that. Let me look. Interesting tidbit about Corbin Carroll. Went to the same high school as Bill Gates and how come I can't remember his name now? Paul Allen, sorry. Private school in Seattle, Lakeside.
Interesting.
He's listed 5'10", 165. So yeah, not the biggest guy. Explosive, right? Like wiry strong, but yeah, not. Again, if I had him, I think I'd be looking to trade him to someone who believes in him as the number one prospect. And then I have a couple other notes. George Valera's stance looks horrible. I don't know how you can hit out of that. I know he has power and takes a ton of walks, but it was ugly. John Kenzie Noel, what did you think of him? His stance.
Yeah, yeah, he was the one I was thinking about. You mentioned a weird stance because he came in for Valera, right?
He did.
Yeah, I was like, man, what's he doing?
What are the Indians doing?
That was a very interesting batting stance. Can I mention another small player? You were talking about Carroll.
Sure.
Other than De La Cruz, I thought Mason Wynn was completely unrefined, like completely raw.
Right.
But he was the guy that oozed like athleticism to me. Like his first throw from shortstop, I did a triple take. And then, but you watch him at the plate, he has good bat speed. He struck out, I think, 2 or 3 times. He made making an error on an easy throw from short as well. But man, could you see the talent? And he is someone who pitched before, and so he's just now focusing on being a hitter. So it's going to take time. But man, his tools, and he was just electric.
They said
completely raw. Completely raw.
It was 100 miles an hour. That throw was from short. That was the hardest recorded throw, I think. O'Neal Cruz just got a bunch of publicity because he threw 97 from short, and it was the hardest throw recorded in the majors. And they said this one was 100. My notes under Wynn is I wonder if he's like the comp that they made that I liked was Rafael Furcal, even though he's not a switch hitter. Furcal did the same thing, right? He would show off his arm from shorter guy, incredibly explosive athlete. The only other guy I've seen throw from short like that was Sean Dunston. And Sean Dunston had a good career, but he didn't have the great career that everybody expected him to have. We'll see with Wynn. He's fun. He's just he was a really fun player to watch for sure.
I have one other highlight. It won't take. I know we have 3 minutes till break here, but you talked about Pete Crow Armstrong a little bit. I enjoyed his mic'd up session, and my favorite, it was like a little bit of humanity and humor. They asked him what he said when he met Griffey. Did you hear this? He was like, "I said hi, I'm Pete." And he was so in awe of Griffey. That's literally all he could think to say.
Right.
Which I just thought was completely human and completely understandable for those of us who look up to Griffey.
Right.
And just to remember that these are kids and that they're people. It made me smile and just made me laugh so much.
That's awesome.
Hi, I'm Pete.
Right. All right, let's take a quick break. We'll come back with some impressions of the first round of the Major League Draft.
Sweet.
Your impressions of the draft. Overall, what's your kind of first thought with the Major League Draft yesterday?
I think my first thought was just Rocker going at 3 to the Rangers. I think what it says about where Texas is. They're clearly, they signed Simeon and Seager this offseason. There's questions of why they would, make that amount of investment. I think they're trying to win. And I think Rocker is obviously closer to being able to contribute than anyone in the draft. And they obviously felt good enough by his medical. So I think it says a lot about the Rangers. And where they're at, and I thought it was a bold, interesting move, and the most interesting one in the top few picks. And then my second was just seeing Tamar go 4
Mhm.
to Pittsburgh. I know he wasn't necessarily projected to go there by some of the people who project the first, the picks and the order and sequence, but I really like that we're, for Pittsburgh being in Pennsylvania, that opportunity, I'm going to be able to see him play.
Mhm.
And just to see the emotion that he had, I was just really excited to see him go there.
If you were a GM or if you ran an organization, how would you approach the draft? I ask this because, as much as I like Kumar Rocker, I felt really bad for him last year uh, with what happened with the Mets. But I think the idea of drafting in the first round at all, based on need and not based on who you believe is the most talented player, is all in any sport, right? Basketball, football, baseball is in my opinion, always short-sighted, right? If Tamar Johnson is like an example might be, people have talked about Baltimore taking Holiday. And then, that means that Gunnar Henderson's going to move to third and Mayo's probably going to be first base or corner outfield. And we don't know when these players could be coming up in
Right.
5 years. We don't really know where they're going to be. We don't know what, if anyone's going to get injured or if someone is not going to reach their potential. Like there's so many factors that go into what happens at the major league level. I would be drafting who I think the best player is, regardless of position.
Right.
Not regardless of position, regardless of what I have in my organization at that position, right?
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
the Pirates spend a number 7 pick overall on Nick Gonzalez 2 years ago. And Nick Gonzalez is supposed to be the next second baseman or shortstop. Too much swing and miss, right? Over 30% K rate right now, injured. They take Tamar. Tamar was the best player on the board for me at number 4. I think passing on Andrew Jones. I've heard some people say that the Orioles passed on Jones because he's a right-handed power hit or right-handed hitter that'll probably hit for power, and left field has become a really difficult place to hit it out in Baltimore. I would never draft based on like park dimensions, right?
Right.
It's crazy.
I agree. Yeah.
Jones
I agree.
is a potentially transcendent defensive center fielder who has great, obviously Holiday has great bloodlines too, but I don't know. It fires me up when teams draft based on major league need in the major league draft. Again, happy for Rocker. I'm glad he's getting his money. I think that he got screwed last year, but for the Rangers to pick based on what's going on the major league level right now, to me was a little bit short-sighted, especially when Tamar ends up being a 320 hitter.
Yeah, that's well said. And I think look at, the Mets took Parada at 10, who was the best catcher in the draft, and they have Alvarez, who's supposedly, the thought of as one of the best young catchers coming
Right.
on his way up. So to your point, there are teams that think that way of like, hey, this is the best player, and that's who we're going to take.
Well, we talked about it from a fantasy perspective, but I also think it applies in real life that if I'm the Mets, say Parada does live up to his billing and say Alvarez does too. Now you have 2 really good hitters who can play an at least average defensive catcher. You can save their knees, right? Each of them catches 80 games, save their knees. You have the National League DH now. I think that was an example of, they probably didn't come into the draft thinking Parada was going to be available, right? Most people
Right.
thought he was going to go like top 6 or so. Take the best player available. Always take the best player available. We saw that same idea play out at number 7 as well when the Cubs took Cade Horton as a pitcher that I think that was a signability thing, so they're going to pay him under slot. But teams need pitching. They know they need pitching, but that's when you start to see teams reach because they're so stressed out about trying to find pitching. And so Horton was someone I think was forecasted to be more in the 20s. what is some of the other, is there a future MVP in this draft to you? Is there any player with that kind of star power?
It doesn't seem like it. No,
Elijah Green, maybe?
maybe.
So he
I mean,
went,
he needs. I mean, his biggest question is the tool that you need to get to all your other tools. So,
right,
and he went to an organization and I don't have a lot of faith in their development.
Nationals.
Yep.
He's a right.
So
He's like the ultimate gamble, the ultimate wild card. Do you have any thoughts about the pitching that was drafted? Or, we had, Lesko had Tommy John. He was a really talented pitcher with a great changeup in high school. He went 15 to the Padres. AJ Preller is a guy who, is known for wanting players who are coming off of Tommy John. The only other questions I have about the draft, one is we saw two players go in the first round who basically are DHs in Jacob Berry and Xavier Isaac. Berry went 9, but he went to Miami, and Isaac went at the end of the first round to Tampa. Would you ever draft players like that? Kind of first base DH types that are current sluggers but don't have a home?
I'm surprised that if that's the profile that Tampa would take him, because they're a team that teaches guys to play multiple positions. So I'm wondering what they see there. For Miami, I mean, I think they need more guys who have a better hit tool and have a better idea at the play. They, have particularly for taking guys that have a lot of swing and miss. So I don't know what Barry's defensive value is, but if he's a better all around hitter,
next to nothing.
Next to nothing. Yeah.
What is interesting though is that
I was gonna say, in terms of the pitching, it was given to be a pretty weak pitching class, so I didn't do a lot of studies. So outside of Lesko, I didn't really have my eye on anybody or know anyone. I was looking to see where they went.
Mm-hmm. So Isaac the pick was, people commented the same way you did, which is, Tampa looks for versatility. They were really puzzled why they took him. But if you look at some of their players on their current roster, like G-Man Choi, right? Big guy, first baseman, maybe DH type. Paredes, you can sort of get away with that second base, but he's so big that he's more of a first base DH type. I don't think it's completely out of left field that Isaac would be picked by the Rays. I think at this high is what's interesting. They see something in his ability to hit. And then Barry, same thing. The Marlins have, Jesus Aguilar, right? Garrett Cooper, who they try to get away with playing in a corner outfield, but really he's a first baseman DH type. So I guess it's just a value filter is why people criticize those two picks. But if they can hit, they can hit. And do you have any favorite players in this draft? Players that you'll really follow or that you would potentially roster? I know you had Brooks Lee for a little while there.
Yeah, I thought him going to the Twins was a good landing spot for him. I was kind of excited to see him go there. If he can develop anything from a fantasy perspective, he can become anything exciting, I think is TBD. Mm-hmm. I did have a couple of disappointments seeing Drew Jones go to the Diamondbacks. I was disappointed to see him land there just because I don't have a lot of faith in Arizona. And he was a player that I was kind of interested to see what he would be from a fantasy perspective. And then I think similarly seeing Zach Neto go to the Angels I was disappointed to see that. I was excited where Lee landed and less excited to see where Neto and Jones landed.
Mm-hmm. So coming into the draft, I rostered two players that were drafted in the first round. One was Termarr Johnson. I think the Pirates organization is in some sort of transition right now. I think we're seeing them develop players that are viable major league players now, and they weren't really doing that previously. They obviously screwed the pooch with Gregory Polanco and some of the others of that generation, but we're seeing Smolinski come up and hit. Diego Castillo is I think a major league player. I don't know if he's a major league regular, but they're starting to get more out of their prospects. And so Termarr going there for me is I wouldn't say it's the best case scenario, but it's exciting. And I think he'll have all the opportunity in the world to develop and to play. He also seems like the type of hitter that may thrive, and Drew Jones may be this same type that may thrive anywhere, right? That they're
Right.
so talented. Drew Jones is so talented that he's going to thrive regardless of organization, especially on the defensive side. That doesn't help us fantasy wise. And I do think that Drew Jones is ultimately a better baseball player than he is fantasy baseball player because he's such a great defensive center fielder. It's part of what attracted me to Termarr Johnson in our draft was, the criticisms of Termarr had everything to do with his size and his defensive home, but his power and his hit tool are the things that are going to carry him. And so I love Termarr. I have from about, I'd say, a year ago, and super excited to watch him develop. He's one of the players that it would take. I don't think I would trade him at this point in time off of my fantasy team. The other one is Cam Collier. Cam Collier, we've talked about in the past, 17 years old.
Yeah.
Everybody knows about him now. I found it interesting that he dropped all the way to 17. I don't think it was something about his profile that we weren't privy to. I think it was teams had other needs or eyes on other players. But he's going to be a fun one to watch develop. And if he's able to progress in the way people think he might, and Cincinnati keeps their fences where they are, he's going to be a really fun offensive player to roster. One other thought, when a player goes to an organization, hitter or pitcher, that we deem to be less capable of developing young talent, does the player's baseball IQ or lineage impact your evaluation at all? And what I mean by that is Andrew Jones, right, goes to Arizona. He's also the son of Andrew Jones. Cam Collier goes to Cincinnati. I don't love Cincinnati's ability to develop players, but he's also the son of a former major leaguer and was conscious enough of his baseball development to get his GED and go to junior college at 17, right? Because his profession is baseball. Does that impact your evaluation of those players and whether they can reach their potential?
I think it does to some degree, but to your point, and it's something that can be overcome by the individual. And that goes to, we see pitchers who are at the major league level or on the cusp of the majors work in these independent labs and refine their arsenal and work on their pitches and pitch shapes on their own, because they are not waiting for their organization to, help them do that. Right. Whereas you have teams like the Guardians and the Rays who do pitch design and do help guys who, in-house do that. So, as there are individuals that can overcome, maybe if there's a lack of data or lack of cohesiveness to what goes on before they get to the show, that they can certainly be overcome. And I think a person's character and drive and work ethic, if that's something that you have privy to, I think valuing that is completely legitimate. And it's something I would do.
Mm-hmm. I do have as a question of this draft, how has Driveline and some of the other tutoring services or pitching, teachings impacted the way that teams approach the draft? And I ask that in part because, in the past, you would see these high schoolers that threw 100 miles an hour get drafted at the top of the draft, right? We now know you can develop velocity, right? You can develop, you can create, like we're in the pitch design era, right? If you're looking for the moldable pitcher, you're not necessarily looking for the pitcher that has already developed because of the injury risk with throwing that hard when you're that young. And so it's something I'm interested in watching over time, over years, how teams approach drafting pitching, right? Are you going to pitch the guy who's sitting low 90s right now, but has the projectable frame that you feel like you can teach? Or are you taking Jack Leiter, who's throwing 98 and already looks like a major league starter? I do think we're starting to see a shift towards the projectable pitcher as opposed to the one who's performing right now. And I do think that driveline and driveline type places have truly impacted the way that teams approach developing young pitching, obviously, and specifically the draft.
Yeah, my only other thought before we go to open forum is, and you mentioned about those picks of the guys that have really defensive limitations. I don't know what forms the rules are going to take, if it's going to be 2 players on each side of second base, if it's going to be everyone has their foot on the dirt, or they just ban the shift, or they don't, they don't change it at all. But it really seems like the winds are blowing that they're going to make some adjustment. And so to me, like, I would be eager for that, so that teams have to have more of a balance between guys who can play defense and guys who bring offensive skills. I think that's, I know I constantly reference this game, but playing out of the park and doing that simulation, trying to build a team, you have to you make those trade-offs.
Right.
And so to me, the shift and it allows teams to get players who are defensively limited on the field more often. And I would love to see, again, no matter what shape the rule takes, I'm excited for more defensive consideration. And then from a fantasy perspective, that doesn't necessarily, we don't get points for that, but having guys who have that skill set are going to play more. And so they will accumulate more. They will have more plate appearances. And so what tools they do have. And so I look forward to having a more well-rounded evaluation where that comes into play more often.
Right. Well, yeah, I think thinking about a player like Jackson Holiday, if he's able to stick at short and play a legitimate shortstop, he'll have greater value. I think he'll have greater value than he may if we just continue to have the shift, right? Because you continue to have the shift, you can play damn near anybody anywhere, right? That's why Paredes plays second base. He's has no mobility, but the Rays assume that, because you can shift people into the right places, he doesn't need to be mobile. We saw freaking Mike Moustakas play second base for almost a season because of the shift. But if the shift is outlawed, we won't be able to do that anymore. And to your point, I think there will become a premium on specifically middle infielders who have the ability to hit a little bit, but are premium defensively. We saw the Mariners pick Cole Young at 21, who was a high school shortstop, who they say probably has a 40 grade power, right? He's not going to hit for home runs, and I thought to myself, why are you picking this plus hit tool defensive shortstop at 21? That's pretty high if he doesn't have any sort of projectable power. But obviously they're thinking ahead, understanding that there is going to be a greater focus on defense as the shift goes away. So that's a great point. And I too look forward to the time when we see specifically up the middle defense valued closer to the way that it was in the past. I don't necessarily want to see Rafael Belliard and those sorts of guys play 150 games, but I do miss some of that type of baseball for sure. Open forum. What you got?
I think this one's low hanging fruit. I mean, I don't know how we can not talk about this. So my open forum question is 2 of our absolute favorite players being matched up in round 1. Your thoughts on Seager versus Julio in the home run derby? I mean, could you have more of a contrast?
You want my immediate thought?
I just think I know what your thoughts are probably going to be, but I just think we have to talk about it because I think they're both so different, and we both have such an affection for each.
Sure.
For these players. Julio is probably going to be there in yellow cleats. He's going to put an absolute show on. It's going to have, $1,000 smile. And Seager will probably be on the phone with this hitting coach 2 minutes before he goes up to make sure that he is dialed in for whatever he's trying to do. They're just completely different people, and they're both having great seasons. And honestly, I hope Seager loses and gets out. And he probably will. I mean, Julio has more raw power.
So that was legitimately my first thought. My first thought was, I hope to God he doesn't screw his swing up.
Yep. Yep.
and that he's able to hit the ground running when we get back to baseball for the Mariners on Friday. Like that was my initial thought when I saw Julio in the Derby at all. I'm like, dude, no, 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 no.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
he, the hope is that he is such a naturally talented player that it doesn't matter. I'm sure the Mariners are also telling him, like, just go up there and swing the way you swing. Uh, I do think that Seager, if we're just talking about the Derby itself, I would gamble on Seager because I think he's got a more swing that's grooved to hit home runs at this point, right? We talked about him at length in terms of changing his launch angle this year. And I think he has the type of swing that where he can lift the ball. I also think him being back in LA is going to motivate him. Julio has a little bit more of a line drive swing that creates backspin. And so those types of players can hit the ball out over and over again. But I think Seager will probably beat Julio. Maybe this is me wish casting on their matchup so that Julio doesn't take too many swings and exhaust himself. But we'll see. It'll be really, really fun.
Yeah, it will. I had the same immediate reaction when I found out Seager was going to do it. Like, no, he's just finding his groove. Please, no.
Right.
But then I thought, to your point, like, he's going back to LA. He's hit 22 home runs. And I think for him, he is someone, again, who kind of works in a shell of he loves hitting. Like, that's his craft, and that's what he loves to hit. And for him, he's kind of a stoic, quiet person outside of the playoffs, where we saw a different side of him in 2020, where he was more emotive. Like, it's like, hey, that's good for him that he's willing to put himself out there, be on that stage,
Right.
because I'm sure it's probably not his, like, it's not his modus operandi. So,
Right.
and yeah, just seeing a matchup with Julio, it's going to be the one matchup where I wish I could see it live. But yeah, it's really fascinating to me.
That's going to
Really
be,
compelling.
it's going to be fun. I do, just with regards to the All-Star game, I do, one of my greatest childhood memories was the anticipation of the All-Star game. And part of it was because of the novelty of American versus National League, because there was no interleague, right? And so it was like so crazy to think that, Astros Nolan Ryan was going to pitch to Mike Schmidt, that kind of thing. So I do miss that. The All-Star game is fun because I love baseball, but it's not quite the same as what it was when I was a kid because of that novelty. So my question for you is there anything that you do in terms of evaluation of your own fantasy team over the break, different than what you do on a week-to-week basis?
I don't think so. I don't think there's any different types of evaluation. I think there'll just be more time spent doing on the same type of analysis.
Sure. So I ask because, yeah, I'm in the same boat. I do this season, week to week, I've been keeping track on a spreadsheet of fantasy stats and then all the other metrics that we tend to look at. Walk and K percentage, BABIP, exit velocities, launch angle, barrel, O swing percent, contact rate, swinging strike, all that sort of thing. So that mostly to see when players are getting better and when players are getting worse, right? And who I may want to trade away and who I may be undervaluing. So I'll go ahead and do that. I do think it'll be, the other thing I'll do is look at the way in which I value those players at the All-Star break versus the way that I did at the beginning of the year, and why there's difference in the valuation, and if it's a permanent difference or if it's something that happened to be because of, let's say, luck over the first half of the season. But I just see the break as an opportunity to dig a little bit deeper. If one doesn't dig deep on a week-to-week basis, it's an opportunity to really dig into the stats and see, is this player performing at the level that I think he is, or is he, again, am I undervaluing or overvaluing that particular player? Or is there injury risk, right? You can look at things like, pitch velocity, fastball velocity. Is it tailing off? Is it really tailing off, and why? Is pitch shape changing? But just one who's really, if you are really into all of this sort of thing, which if you're listening to the podcast, you probably are. I just see the break as a really fun opportunity to dig much deeper the way that you might in the off season.
Can I ask your opinion on who you think deserves to be the American League starting pitcher?
Oh, boy. Let me pull the rosters real quick. Let's see. There are the starters. I will need the rosters. There, it's from 21. Darn it.
Starting pitchers for the American League are McClanahan, Verlander, Manoah, Cortez, Cole, and Ohtani.
I'm sorry. Read them to
It's
me.
okay. Yeah, for sure. McClanahan, Verlander, Manoah, Cortez, Cole, and Ohtani. To me, there's two guys who deserve consideration.
It's McClanahan or Ohtani to me.
Yeah, same.
Just off the top of my head, I haven't even looked. I just pulled up the Fangraphs leaderboard to look at statistics, but in my mind, those are the two that pop immediately. I don't know. I think that the All-Star game should be part based on first half performance and part based on entertainment, right, and excitement. And because of that, Ohtani would be my choice. I love McClanahan. I think McClanahan is a top 5 pitcher moving forward, but Ohtani is Ohtani, right? And if we're trying to market the game, and if we're trying to make the All-Star game into an extravaganza and bring in fans that aren't typically baseball fans, like Ohtani's the guy. And I don't think that there's a real argument otherwise. I know that McClanahan has had a historically great season thus far, but to me, it's Ohtani. What about National League?
Same exercise. National League: Alcantara, Burns, Musgrove, Fried, Gonsolin, Castillo, Kershaw, Rodon, Tyler Anderson. It's interesting. There's a lot more pitchers on the National League side.
First of all, Rodon not being named to the team initially is freaking ridiculous. I think that was a huge oversight. So same argument as last time. I think Alcantara is a pretty clear starter as far from a statistical perspective. He's thrown 138.1 innings so far, which is just wild. Obviously, he's been absolutely dominant his last couple of starts. The next closest in innings pitched is Nola at 126.2, Michaelis 120.1, and no one else is over 120. That said, because it's in Dodger Stadium, I think Kershaw's probably your sentimental pick.
Yeah.
So for me, it would be Kershaw, but from a performance standpoint, I think Alcantara has been gross the last 10 starts or so. I loathe the fact that I argued Logan Webb against Sandy Alcantara in the offseason because I was proven incredibly wrong. But we all find places to stand, and that happened to be one of mine. Not that Webb's been bad, right? Webb is
no
9-3 with a 2.83 ERA, like in a 3.10 FIP. Actually, I think Webb's xFIP is lower than Alcantara's, but it is what it is. The idea of Kershaw versus Ohtani is just awesome. I think it's just that would be, to me, that's the dream pitching matchup. Now I'm getting all excited for the All-Star game, man. I wasn't even excited for the conversation. I'm like, let's go.
Yeah, I want to know who's going to be mic'd up, and let's do it.
Right.
Yeah, the typical baseball and coffee. Like all I can think about is the pitching matchups.
Mm-hmm. So one other thing, I'm looking at the American League starters. You could not, from a physical standpoint, it's like David and Goliath. You have Alejandro Kirk, right, who's 5'8", 260. You have Vladito, who is 5'11". He's not 6 feet. He's like 5'11", 250. You got Jose Altuve, who's 5'5". You've got Rafael Devers, who's, I wouldn't say pudgy, but he's not sleek.
He's rotund.
Yes, but then you have Tim Anderson, who's, like an Adonis. Aaron
Yep.
Judge, who's 6'7". Mike Trout, who's built like a tank. Giancarlo Stanton and Shohei Ohtani, right? So you've got these physical marvels, and then you have like the chubby dude that doesn't look like he should be playing baseball, and the guy who's 5'5". It's like you couldn't be more extreme on either
It's
end.
baseball though. I love it.
It's crazy. That was just my first glance. Whereas like the National League is pretty straightforward. It's Wilson Contreras, Paul Goldschmidt, Jazz Chisholm, Manny Machado, Trey Turner, Acuna, Jock Peterson, Betts, Harper. Like that's kind of your standard, 6'1", 6'2", 6'3" athlete. American League looks like it's what was the game? Did you play ice hockey on Nintendo ever?
I was a Sega guy.
So the original Nintendo had an ice hockey game, and you could construct your team, and there were 3 different hockey player profiles, and it was literally like skinny, average, and fat. And so some people would pick like all fat guys, and some people would pick all skinny guys, and the fat guys were powerful, skinny guys were fast. But looking at the American League lineup, that's what it reminds me of. Is like someone sat there and only picked skinny and fat guys for the team. It's hilarious.
It's funny.
All right, cards.
All right.
What you got?
Cards. All right. So I found at random, I found this Donruss
Cool.
50 card set,
Uh-huh.
2022. I know you've mentioned Donruss a couple of times. So this is a 50 pack, and they all came and one sealed. So I just grabbed a small stack
Nice.
up from that 50. So we got Liam Hendricks.
Oop. Cool. I say too, I love how outspoken Hendricks is. Whether you
Yes.
agree with him or not, I happen to, but whether you agree with him or not, the fact that he's taken such a strong stand on a lot of issues is really admirable. And he's a guy I root for because he's willing to have an opinion and be convicted. So cheers to you, Liam Hendricks. I appreciate him quite a bit.
Agreed. Yu Darvish.
Nice. These cards are really pretty.
Yeah, they are. A couple J's.
Vladito, there he is. What is his listed measurements?
Let's have a look.
Do they even put him on there anymore?
You know what? It doesn't have it on here.
That's funny. That used to be one of my favorite parts about cards.
Kirk would be offended. He's like, that's why Donruss sucks.
Bo.
His a battery mate, and then here fallen member of our draft and hold pitching staff. I remember John Means.
Oh, John Means.
Yeah. I remember debating that pick with you.
I won't say which side I was on. I won't say which side I was on. There's your boy.
Jamer. Oh, here's a guy we both love.
Yeah.
Good pack so far.
Man.
And then
I've gotten lucky with him.
Last one for today. A classic there. George Brett.
Nice. Can you name his highest average season? What did he hit?
He pushed for 400 one year. He fell short. I'll say 392.
He hit 390, I believe. I'm going to double check. Can you imagine a player hitting 390 now?
I cannot.
Not with the shift, but obviously, but in general. He hit, 390, 454, 664. His OPS was 1.118. 117 games, 33 doubles, 9 triples, 24 home runs, hit 118 RBIs in 117 games. Add 15 steals and a Gold Glove third base. I almost think George Brett was underrated.
He might have been. Yeah, I like these cards. I like them quite a bit.
Yeah, they're really
Cool.
nice. I need to
Cool.
find, where'd you get them?
I just happened to. I've made a habit of when I go to Target, I just kind of meander past.
Sure.
They had another set, another manufacturer, but they were like $60. I couldn't buy them. These were like 14 for 50 cards. So, all
Awesome. Awesome. It'll be my turn next. I'll have to pick some up.
right, sounds good.
Cool, man. So next episode, I think we're gonna do our rest of season rankings for hitters. And then we'll follow up this weekend, I think, with an episode on pitchers. Cool.
Sounds good.
It's good to see you, brother.
Good to see you. Enjoy
All
the
right.
All-Star game.
You
Bye.
too.